Good evening. Tonight's lead story is one that should concern every citizen who believes the post-Second World War international order still matters. Americans, Europeans, and indeed anyone living in a society built on rules rather than raw power. What we are witnessing now appears to be the most serious escalation in European security since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. I want to choose my words carefully, because the implications of what is unfolding in real time are not merely serious, they are historic. Let us begin with what we know. Over the past 72 hours, satellite imagery and intelligence assessments from multiple NATO member states have confirmed a significant concentration of Russian military forces along the borders of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. These three nations, collectively known as the Baltic states, represent something Vladimir Putin has never truly reconciled himself to. They are former Soviet republics, now sovereign democracies, and crucially, they are full members of NATO, sitting directly on Russia's western frontier. The scale of the movement is alarming. Intelligence estimates suggest roughly 40,000 Russian troops are being redeployed from various military districts toward the Baltic region. Alongside those forces, analysts have identified mobile missile systems, advanced air defense batteries, and extensive logistical movements, the kind of supply chain activity that signals preparation for operations far more serious than a routine military exercise. What makes this moment different from previous episodes of Russian brinkmanship is not merely the troop movements themselves, but the reaction they have provoked. Poland has closed its border with Belarus entirely. For the first time since joining NATO, Warsaw has taken the extraordinary step of sealing a major international boundary, citing what Polish officials describe as imminent security threats arising from coordinated Russian and Belarusian military activity. At the same time, NATO is no longer limiting itself to statements of concern. This time, the alliance is moving forces. Context matters here. The Baltic states have long been recognized as NATO's most vulnerable members. A glance at the map explains why. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are geographically isolated from the rest of the alliance. They border Russia directly. They also border Belarus, which has effectively become a client state of Moscow. Their only land connection to the rest of NATO runs through a narrow strip of territory between Poland and Lithuania known as the Suwałki Gap. Military planners have warned about this corridor for years. It is roughly 65 kilometers wide. That is all. Should Russia seize that stretch of land, the Baltic states would be cut off entirely, isolated from reinforcements, and militarily indefensible without a major and costly effort to reopen the route. This is not an abstract wargaming scenario dreamed up in a defense ministry briefing room. This is the physical geography Vladimir Putin studies every day. And tonight, there are growing indications that he may be testing whether NATO truly has the resolve to defend it. So, what is NATO doing in response? The answer is, quite a lot, and very quickly. Within hours of confirming Russia's troop movements, the North Atlantic Council convened an emergency session in Brussels. The outcome was a decision to activate enhanced readiness measures across NATO's eastern flank. In practical terms, this means the United States is deploying an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, forces coming directly from bases in the continental United States, not simply repositioned from elsewhere in Europe. They are expected to arrive within the next 48 to 72 hours. Germany, meanwhile, has activated its Rapid Response Brigade, sending approximately 4,000 troops to Lithuania. That decision is particularly significant. Berlin has historically been cautious in its posture toward Moscow, shaped by the legacy of the Second World War, decades of Ostpolitik, and deep economic ties driven by energy dependence. That caution now appears to be giving way to a far more hard-edged assessment of the threat Russia poses to European security. This shift matters because Germany has, for decades, been reluctant to adopt an openly confrontational stance toward Russia. The shadow of the Second World War, the long tradition of Ostpolitik, and deep economic ties rooted in energy dependence all contributed to a cautious approach. That caution now appears to be dissolving. Berlin's decision to move forces east signals a recognition that restraint alone no longer guarantees stability. Germany is not acting alone. the United Kingdom is deploying additional personnel and armored vehicles to Estonia, where British troops have led a NATO battle group since 2017. France is repositioning air assets to Romania. Canada is reinforcing its contingent in Latvia. Taken together, these moves amount to roughly 20,000 additional NATO troops being placed along the alliance's eastern flank. This represents the largest rapid deployment in NATO's history since its founding in 1949. It is not symbolic, it is operational. Then there is Poland. Warsaw's decision to close its border with Belarus is extraordinary, and that word is used deliberately. Poland is a member of the European Union's open border system. It has been a model of integration into Western political, economic, and security structures. Yet tonight, Polish authorities have concluded that the threat from the east is grave enough to justify an action with significant economic, diplomatic, and political consequences. Earlier this evening, the Polish government released a statement whose language deserves close attention. It cited confirmed intelligence regarding coordinated military activities between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus, and explicitly referenced Poland's obligations under Articles 4 and 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. As a result, Poland announced the immediate suspension of all border crossings with Belarus until further notice. This is not routine diplomatic wording. Article 4 allows any NATO member to request consultations if it believes its territorial integrity or security is under threat. Article 5, however, is the cornerstone of the alliance, the mutual defense clause stating that an attack on one member is an attack on all. By invoking both articles in an official statement, Poland is signaling that it believes the situation may be approaching the threshold of collective defense. This is not said lightly, and it is certainly not accidental. Every word has been chosen with care. So why might Vladimir Putin be doing this? Several explanations are circulating among analysts and officials. The first is distraction. Russia's war in Ukraine has not unfolded as planned. What was intended to be a swift decapitation strike against Kiev became a prolonged and brutal war of attrition. Russian casualties have been heavy. Economic pressures, despite official reassurances, are mounting. Domestic discontent, though tightly controlled, has not disappeared. By manufacturing a new crisis in the Baltic region, the Kremlin may be seeking to divert attention, both internationally and at home, from its failures in Ukraine. The second theory is testing. Putin has long been a leader who probes boundaries to see how far he can go. He did so in Georgia in 2008. He did so in Crimea in 2014. He did so repeatedly in eastern Ukraine in the years that followed. Each time, Western responses were measured, cautious, and ultimately insufficient to reverse his gains. The question now is whether NATO, after years of supporting Ukraine, has the political will to risk direct confrontation over the Baltic states. The third explanation is opportunism. The political environment in the West is unsettled. The United States is in the midst of an election cycle. European politics are fragmented. Economic pressures dominate public debate. If there were ever a moment when Western democracies might appear distracted or divided, this could be it. From Moscow's perspective, such moments can look like windows of opportunity. In practical terms, this means the United States is deploying an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, forces coming directly from bases in the continental United States, not simply repositioned from elsewhere in Europe. They are expected to arrive within the next 48 to 72 hours. Germany, meanwhile, has activated its Rapid Response Brigade, sending approximately 4,000 troops to Lithuania. That decision is particularly significant. Berlin has historically been cautious in its posture toward Moscow, shaped by the legacy of the Second World War, decades of Ostpolitik, and deep economic ties driven by energy dependence. That caution now appears to be giving way to a far more hard-edged assessment of the threat Russia poses to European security.